Today we're going to look at how to sew on a stripe. In Cuong, our ranks come in both new belts and also colored stripes. And when you first earn a stripe, it's paper clipped onto your belt, to the end of your belt by your instructor. You should have this stripe sewn on by the next class so that it doesn't fall off, it's not going to fall apart, and also to show respect for your rank. So the first thing you want to do when you get it home is to check if it's on the end, if it's on top of a label or something else on your belt. So here on this case, it's on top of the label. Either you can remove the label, or if this is your first stripe, nothing's on the other end of your belt, you can switch it to the other end of the belt where there is no label. So I'm just going to transfer my stripe over. It should be in the same location to my new belt, to the new belt end rather. This side has no label on either side. So now that I have the placement, I want to tuck the edge underneath. So I don't want to leave this end out where it could become frayed. So I'm just going to fold it slightly underneath. And then I can use the paper clip again to hold it in place temporarily while I get started on the sewing. I'm actually going to put it on this side to hold the folded end in as well. Okay, and I'll make sure that nothing is sticking out as I start the sewing. This is a simple stitch that I use that seems to work very well and holds the stripe in place. So today I'm going to use a purple thread so that it shows up well. Normally you would use the same color as the stripe, so I would use a yellow thread if I'm sewing on a yellow stripe. So I've already put the thread into my needle, and now for extra durability I'm going to leave it doubled up and bring it all the way to the end and knot it. You could do a single thread stitch as well, but because sometimes we're a little hard on belts in class, we're moving around a lot and you really don't want it to come loose, I like to do a double thread just to make sure that it's not going to fall off at any point. So I'm going to just knot the end of it twice, just enough to hold it as I start my stitch. Okay, so I have my knot at the end, and now I want to start over here on this section that I folded over because I want to make sure that that part is going to hold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to go underneath the edge of it, and I'm just going to slide it through the stripe. So I'm going inside the fold part, the part where I doubled up, and I slide it through, and I'm actually going to bring it close to the end if I can. Slide it through, pull it all the way through, and now my knot is holding it in place, and the end of the thread is sticking out a little bit, and I'll tuck that in as I go. Okay, so I have my first stitch in place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along this edge of the stripe first. So what I want to do, now that I'm in the stripe, I'm just going to take a little stitch and I'm going to go into the belt. I don't need to catch a lot of the belt, but just a little bit of the belt right underneath where the edge of the stripe is. Pokes through, hopefully you can see that, pokes through both sides. And then I'm just going to keep going until it pokes through the edge of the stripe. I don't want to catch a whole lot of stripe because I don't want my thread to show very much, but enough to keep it, to catch it, and just slide it all the way through. Pull it until it's taut. I'm going to move the end of my knot. I'll deal with that when I get around to the other side through, and now I've made my first stitch. I'm going to keep going along this same edge. So I go just a little bit outside, poke through, catch a little bit of fabric, and then all the way through the stripe on the other side and pull it. Whoops. It got caught a little bit. Make sure you don't get a knot in there as you're pulling it through. A little bit tangled here. There we go. Okay, so each one It doesn't look like it caught much of it, but it did catch enough of it to hold. And that's what I want. I don't want to go very deep into my stripe where it's going to show a lot, but I do want enough to hold. So I go in at an angle, I catch part of my belt, and then I continue up and go through the edge of the stripe, just a little bit of fabric from each part, and pull the needle through. And then I'm just going to continue this all the way along this edge. And you can make it tighter stitches to make sure that it holds on firmly. I'm going a little bit wider stitches than I normally would, just for the demonstration today. Just be careful to pull it each time. Make sure that there's no snags. So you see the stitching, the little diagonal stitches along. And if those are the yellow, they'll blend right in with the stripe. Because I've reached where the bottom edge of my stripe, which was folded under, is. So now I don't really want this part showing, so I'm just going to tuck it underneath. I'm going to take the paper clip off now. It's not going anywhere at this point. I've sewn on enough that I don't need that to hold it in onto the belt. And I'm just going to make sure that that edge is not showing very much. So when I sew it, see, now I'm just pinching it with my thumb so that that second edge, which is right there, is underneath. And what I want to do now is I want to go outside it, and I want to just make sure that I catch the top stripe edge. Catch this top one, the same one I've been doing all along. A couple more stitches on this side. Okay, very good. Now this part was the beginning where I started, and that was the end where the knot was. So I'm just going to tuck that. You could trim it a little bit shorter. Maybe I will for this. It's a little bit longer than I want to have to tuck inside. So I'm just going to trim it a little bit shorter. I'm not going to take too much off because I don't want to risk the knot coming undone. But now that it's a little bit shorter, there we go. I'm just going to use the needle and just kind of push it inside so that it's not visible. So the knot and the tail of the knot are hidden inside. Now I'm going to do another stitch or two along this part. Make sure I get both parts pulled there. There we go. So now I've made it back to where I started. I'm going to go one more, so I'm kind of catching that starting spot one more time just to make sure that I'm on there well. And I'm going to go through, this time I'm going to go through all the layers. So I'm going to catch the belt right at the edge, and I'm going to come up through all the layers here. All of the layers of the folded end and the stripe underneath. And then when I push it through, I'm a little bit deeper this round where that fold was. It's hiding the edge of the stripe so that it doesn't come unraveled. If you do a really nice job sewing it on, but you don't have that end folded in, you run the risk of it unraveling afterwards. Okay, so now I'm just going to travel along this folded edge with a couple of stitches just to hold this in place. Now this is the time where you really do want your thread color to match your stripe color. So I'm going to do the same method that I did before, but this time I'm just doing it with the two parts of the stripe. And you don't need to have too many stitches along this part. It's just enough to keep it from getting loose or from opening up. I'll do 2 stitches here and into the end. Okay, so that's going to keep that from snagging. Now I'm on the other edge, and all I have to do is go around the same method that I did on the first edge on this second edge. So I'm going to start here and just work my way around. I think I'm going to go this direction. So I'm going to deal with this extra part of the stripe first. So I'm going to tuck it underneath just like I did before so that it's not showing. And I'm going to use this first stitch here to hold it in place. Catching the belts below, just a little bit, and then coming up. Let me see if I can get it so it just gets the top layer of stripe. This part is being a little tricky. There you go. I can kind of move the belt around and use the needle to get that angle. So I got just the belt and the top layer of the stripe. So that'll work well to hold the under layers firmly in place so they can't slide out on either side. I'll just make sure that the thread isn't caught on the end there. Okay, and now I'm all set to continue along this edge. Okay, and now that I'm back at the beginning, I'm going to do one more stitch and I'm going to find a spot to tie it off. So I'm going to go one more through here, and this is the part that would be most likely to come apart since it's where all the pieces come together. So I want to make sure that this part is secure. So one more through all those layers, pull it tight, and then before I go all the way tight, I'm just going to loop my needle back through the loop of that last stitch, and then as I pull it tight, it just makes a little bit of a knot right there to keep it from coming unraveled. And I'll just go through it one more time with the needle. Whoops. One more extra knot just to make sure it doesn't come loose. Pull it through and go through that loop of that last stitch before you pull it taut. And then as you slide it down, it should go right in there, and it pulls a little bit, holding the whole thing together. So now my stripe is sewn on. This edge is not going to unravel because it's folded under with a couple of stitches to hold it in place. And the front with yellow thread or a thread that matches your stripes won't show at all. And all I'm going to do is snip this off pretty close to the edge. And there you go. Now you've sewn on your stripe and you're ready for class.